Hi, I'm Spiders, and in yesterday's update they added Enchant Grease, which makes it a lot easier to get the exact armor enchants that you want. So, because of that, I thought now would be a good time to make an updated armor enchant tier list, so that you know exactly what you should be running. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first armor enchant we have is Adhesive. Now, Adhesive honestly goes immediately down that D tier. Now, basically what Adhesive does is it makes it so that when your opponent hits you, they get pulled towards you. Now, this is really bad and actually helps your opponent because when you get hit by your opponent, this basically lets them stick near you and just keep comboing you and makes it easier. So seriously, you should never be running this enchant. It's honestly better to just have no enchant at all compared to this enchant. Never run Adhesive. And next up, we have Allure. Now, Allure I actually think is pretty good because what it does is it makes it so that when your opponent hits you, it has a chance to apply Charm. And Charm is a really good effect because it makes your opponents do 10% less damage to you when they have it on themselves. And if you also have Tough Love, it makes you do 10% more damage to them, which is really good, and I think this armor enchant is really helpful for keeping that constantly active. So for now, we're going to put this in A tier. And next up, we have Bounce. Now, Bounce makes it so that there's a 20% chance to knock your opponent back when they hit you. So yeah, this is basically the opposite of Adhesive. Now, people have pretty mixed opinions about this armor enchant, but I actually think that's pretty good because if someone's trying to combo you, like especially like light weapon users, this enchant can just knock them back and really like upset the flow of things for them. And honestly, there's not a lot of really good counters to light weapon. So I think you really gotta take what you can, and I'm gonna put Bounce in A tier. I think it's pretty solid right now. And next we have Displacement, which on proc gives you a speed boost and hyper armor. Now honestly, just from what I've seen, the speed boost and hyper armor are really not very noticeable in this armor enchant, and at least at top level play, I basically never see anyone run this armor enchant, so I don't think it's very good. Its effect is definitely not bad, I'd say, but it's just not impactful enough to be super good, so for now, I'm just gonna put this in B tier. Next we have Drowned. Now this was a PvE tier list. I would probably put Drowned in S tier since it gives 5% DVM, 5% monster armor, which is super good. But as a PvP player, this enchant is mostly made for PvP. So that's what I'll be basing it on. Now besides the PvE stuff, this enchant does give 10 health and 10 ether, which is not bad. But compared to other armor enchants, its effect is really not super helpful, really just the 10 HP. It's just really not impactful enough. It's good, but I would really recommend using a different armor enchant instead. So for now, this will also be in B tier, but definitely not bad either. And moving on, we have Entanglement, which is honestly a pretty interesting armor enchant in my opinion. Basically, whenever it activates, it slows you down and reduces the damage taken for the next 5 attacks by 10%. So basically, this armor enchant has a downside, which is the slow effect, but also a really strong upside, which is the free damage resistance. Now personally, you will never see me running this enchant because I am a Gale player, and having that slowness is really bad on Gale. But if you're using a build that didn't really rely so heavily on mobility, then this armor enchant might be a lot better. So I think that's a pretty key thing about this armor enchant to note. But that being said, the builds that you can use this armor enchant on, this armor enchant is super good on. So for now, I'm just gonna put this in A tier. And next we have Ferocity. Now Ferocity basically gives you a speed boost and a damage reduction depending on how much tempo you have whenever it activates. And from what I know, that effect goes really heavily with your tempo, so this armor enchant is going to be a lot better if you have high tempo. So yeah, this is also fairly build dependent, and if you're more of a passive player that ends up with 0 tempo near the end of fights, which is pretty much how it goes, then this armor enchant might not be good for you. But maybe if you use like an Ishin's Ring or just have a build that you don't really vent on, then this armor enchant will definitely be better. But overall, I'd say it's a pretty solid enchant and not really required on builds though. So pretty good. It'll be an A tier for now. But yeah, it definitely depends on the player and the build for whether or not you should be using this armor enchant. So that is definitely something worth noting. And moving on from that, we have Multiplicity, which is going to be our first S tier armor enchant. Now Multiplicity, whenever you get hit, it has a chance of either giving you food, water, or most importantly, giving you health back, which is really good. And this armor enchant recently got nerfed and has a much lower chance of activating. But even then, just one activation of this armor enchant is super impactful and will heal you a lot of health. And for that reason, this armor enchant is still an S tier. It's very good. And basically, you want to be running this on every build, even after the nerf. Solely for that free healing they get from it, but also the free hunger and thirst is also pretty nice quality of life as well. And the second to last armor enchant we have is Stench. Now the horrible drip aside, this armor enchant is actually pretty strong for PvP, and whenever it activates, it summons like a little gas bubble thingy that does damage and can be dodged and blocked, I believe, but it's really hard to react to, and it's basically just free damage most of the time. And free damage is always a really good thing, so of course we'll be putting this armor enchant A tier as well for now. Very solid. And last up we have Viscosity, which is one of my favorite armor enchants. Now basically this armor enchant has 2 effects, the first of which makes it so that the damage you take is taken over time instead of instantly, over the course of 2.5 seconds. Now this effect I believe does have some upsides, and potentially some downsides as well, but it's kind of hard to really say about that. So I really want to talk more about the second effect, which is that you can't get knocked unless you take damage at 1% HP. So basically what this means is that in order to get knocked, you have to be hit at specifically 1% HP. Even if you're at like 2% HP and you take like an Eclipse Kick worth of damage, which is like a lot, no matter what, you won't get knocked unless you're at 1% HP, which is very strong. For example, what a lot of people do when they have this armor enchant is that whenever they get to 1% HP and viscosity saves them from being knocked, you can just play passive, and as soon as you land a parry, you can just spit, get up above 1% HP, and you're basically free to fight however you like, and you will be safe from whatever attack your opponent does next. Since this armor enchant will always save you assuming you're above 1% HP. So you can kind of just like do that over and over again, and it's really hard to kill you sometimes, which makes this armor enchant have really insane potential. So for that reason, this is always going to be in S tier. Very, very good armor enchant if you know how to use it properly. Alright, so now that you've seen this tier list, you might be wondering which armor enchants you should actually be using on your builds. Well, for all PvP builds, I really recommend running the 2 S tier enchants at least, which are Multiplicity and Viscosity. Those are both super good, and I really recommend running that on every PvP build. And for the third and last enchant you can run on your build, you should probably be running any enchant in A tier, just kind of based on your preference. Personally, I've been running Bounce, but it's sort of up to you depending on what you prefer, so just keep that in mind. Anyway, that's all for this video. Thanks for watching, and like and subscribe for more top content. See you in the next one.